Most people lose control of their mind before their day even begins. They wake up, reach for their phone, scroll without thinking, react to messages, absorb noise. And within minutes, their focus is gone, their calm is gone, their control is gone, and they don't even realize it. Because it feels normal, it feels like routine. But it is not harmless. It is the beginning of distraction, the beginning of mental chaos, the beginning of a day lived reactively instead of intentionally. But there is a small percentage of people who live differently. They wake up, and before anything touches their mind, they take control of it. They do not react. They decide. They do not follow their thoughts. They observe them. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, not because his life was easy, but because it was not. Because he understood something most people ignore. If you do not control your mind will control you. And once your mind controls you, everything else follows. Your emotions, your actions, your decisions, your entire day. This is why control begins in the morning, not later, not after distractions, but immediately. If you take control early, you carry that control throughout the day. If you lose it early, you spend the rest of the day trying to recover, and most people never do. If you want to become part of the 1%, you must start differently. Think differently. Act differently. If you want more content that builds a powerful and disciplined mind, subscribe to the channel. Because control is not given, it is built. 1. They control their first thoughts. The first few minutes after you wake up are the most important moments of your day. Because your mind is open, unfocused, easily influenced, and whatever enters your mind first sets the tone for everything that follows. Most people allow anything to enter. Notifications, social media, messages, noise, and without realizing it, they hand over control. They allow external input to shape their internal state. But the 1% does something different. They protect those first moments. They do not rush into the world. They turn inward first. They observe their thoughts. They guide them. They choose what to focus on. The Stoics understood the importance of this. The philosopher Epictetus taught that you must take responsibility for your mind. Not occasionally, but consistently. Because your thoughts are not random, they can be trained, directed, improved. A strong person does not wake up and react. They wake up and decide. They decide how they will think, how they will act, how they will respond to whatever comes. And that decision creates control, because now their mindset is not being shaped by the world. It is being shaped by them. Each morning becomes an opportunity, not to drift, but to lead yourself, to guide your thinking, to create clarity. This is the difference. Small in action, but powerful in result. Because the way you begin your day often determines how you live it. Because control begins with your first thought. 2. They do not react instantly. Most people react without thinking. Something happens, and immediately they respond, emotionally, impulsively, automatically. They do not pause. They do not reflect. They simply react. And this creates problems, unnecessary conflict, stress, regret, because reactions are often driven by emotion, not clarity. But the 1% does something different. They pause. They create space between what happens and how they respond, and in that space, they gain control. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that you always have the power to choose your response, no matter the situation, no matter the emotion, no matter the pressure. A strong person does not allow emotions to control their actions. They observe them, they understand them, but they do not follow them blindly. This does not mean they feel nothing. It means they are not controlled by what they feel. Each time you pause before reacting, something changes. You reduce mistakes, you reduce stress, you improve your decisions, and over time this becomes a habit of awareness, a habit of control, because now you are no longer reacting to life. You are responding to it, and that difference is everything, because control is built in the moments you choose not to react. 3. They control their attention. Your attention is one of the most powerful resources you have, but most people give it away freely, without thinking, without questioning, without control. They give it to distractions, to notifications, to things that do not improve their life, and over time this weakens their mind, because where your attention goes, your energy follows. And where your energy goes, your life is shaped. Most people do not realize this. They believe their lack of progress is due to lack of time. But in reality, it is often due to lack of focus. They have time, but their attention is scattered, pulled in different directions, constantly interrupted. And because of that, they never go deep. Never fully commit, never fully improve, but the 1% understands something different. They protect their attention. They treat it as something valuable, something limited, something that must be used intentionally. The philosopher Seneca warned that we lose much of our life not because we have too little time, but because we waste much of it. And attention is where that waste begins. A strong person becomes selective. They do not give attention to everything. They choose, they decide, they focus on what matters, and ignore what does not. This does not mean they avoid the world. It means they control how they engage with it. Each time you direct your attention intentionally, you strengthen your focus. Each time you allow it to drift, you weaken it. This is the trade. And it is happening constantly. The more you control your attention, the more control you have over your life, because attention shapes thinking, thinking shapes action, and action shapes results. Each morning, when you remind yourself to guard your attention, something shifts. You become more aware, more intentional, more focused, and over time that focus creates progress, real progress, because now your energy is aligned with your purpose, because where your attention goes, your life follows. 4. They eliminate mental noise. There is a constant noise in most people's minds, a stream of thoughts, worries, distractions, unnecessary conversations, replaying past situations, imagining future problems. And this noise creates confusion, it creates stress, it makes it difficult to think clearly. Most people accept this as normal. They believe this is just how the mind works. But it does not have to be this way. The Stoics understood that clarity comes from reducing noise, not adding more information, not thinking more, but thinking better. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius practiced mental discipline daily. He wrote down his thoughts, he questioned them, he simplified them, because he knew that a noisy mind leads to a chaotic life. But a clear mind leads to focused action. A strong person learns to quiet their mind, not by forcing silence, but by removing what is unnecessary. They stop engaging in useless thoughts. They stop replaying situations they cannot change. They stop imagining outcomes that have not happened. And slowly the noise begins to fade. At first, this is difficult, because the mind is used to constant activity. It seeks stimulation, it seeks distraction. But with practice, something changes. You become more aware of your thoughts. You begin to notice what is useful and what is not. And once you notice, you can choose, you can let go, you can simplify, you can focus. This creates clarity, and clarity creates control, because now your thinking is not scattered, it is directed, intentional, effective. Each time you reduce mental noise, you create space. Space for better decisions, better focus, better action. A mentally strong person values this space, they protect it, they cultivate it, because they understand that a calm mind is a powerful mind. Each morning, when you remind yourself to eliminate mental noise, something shifts. You feel lighter, more focused, more in control, and that control carries into everything you do. If this message is helping you clear your mind, subscribe to the channel, because clarity is where strength begins. 5. They master their emotions. Most people believe emotions control them. They feel anger and react. They feel fear and withdraw. They feel stress and become overwhelmed. And because of this, their emotions dictate their actions, their decisions, their outcomes. But the 1% understands something different. Emotions are signals, not commands. They are information, not instructions. And once you understand this, something changes. You stop being controlled by what you feel. You begin to observe it. The philosopher Epictetus taught that it is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them, which means your emotions are not created by situations alone, but by how you interpret them. And if your interpretation changes, your emotional response changes. This is where control begins. Not by suppressing emotion, not by ignoring it, but by understanding it. A strong person does not deny their emotions. They face them, they examine them, they ask, why do I feel this way? Is this reaction useful? Is it helping me or harming me? And in that process they create space between feeling and action. And in that space they choose how to respond, instead of reacting automatically. At first this requires effort, because emotional reactions are fast, automatic, deeply ingrained. But with practice something shifts. You begin to slow down, you begin to notice patterns, you begin to recognize triggers. And once you recognize them, you gain control, because now you are not reacting blindly. You are responding consciously. Each time you choose your response instead of reacting, you strengthen your mind. You build emotional discipline. You reduce regret. You improve your decisions. And over time, this becomes natural. A habit of awareness, a habit of control. A mentally strong person is not someone who feels nothing. It is someone who is not controlled by what they feel. And that difference is powerful, because emotions can be intense. But they are temporary. They rise, they peak, they fade. But the actions you take during those moments can have lasting consequences. This is why control matters. Not to eliminate emotion, but to guide your response. Each morning when you remind yourself to master your emotions, something changes. You become more aware, more patient, more intentional, and that awareness carries into everything you do. Because emotional control is real strength. 6. They stop overthinking. There is a silent habit that drains most people every day. Overthinking, replaying conversations, imagining worst-case scenarios, questioning decisions, doubting themselves. And all of it happens in the mind, quietly, constantly, and often unnecessarily. Most people believe overthinking helps them, that it prepares them, that it protects them. but in reality does the opposite. It creates stress, it creates anxiety, it creates confusion, because instead of solving problems, it multiplies them. The philosopher Seneca warned that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and overthinking is the perfect example of this. You create scenarios that have not happened. You assume outcomes that may never occur. You build problems that do not exist. And then you react to them as if they are real. This is the trap, and most people never escape it. Because they believe their thoughts, they follow them, they get lost in them. But the 1% does something different. They question their thoughts. They do not assume every thought is true. They observe, they evaluate. They ask, is this useful? Is this real? Is this helping me move forward? And if the answer is no, they let it go. At first, this is not easy, because the mind is used to constant thinking, constant analyzing, constant worrying, but with practice something changes. You begin to recognize when you are overthinking. You catch yourself earlier, you interrupt the pattern, and slowly the habit weakens. Each time you stop an unnecessary thought, you reduce mental noise. Each time you let go of overthinking, you create clarity. And that clarity improves your decisions, your focus, your peace of mind. A strong person does not try to control every thought. They control what they focus on, because thoughts will come and go. But attention determines which ones grow. If you focus on fear, it expands. If you focus on clarity, it strengthens. If you focus on action, it progresses. Each morning when you remind yourself to stop overthinking, something shifts. You become calmer, more focused, more in control. Because now your mind is not working against you, it is working for you. Because a calm mind is a powerful mind. 7. They act without waiting. There is a silent habit that keeps most people stuck. They wait for the right time, the right mood, the right level of motivation, and while they are waiting, nothing changes. Days pass, opportunities pass, progress slows, because waiting feels safe. It feels like preparation. It feels like you are getting ready. But in reality, it is often just delay. The Stoics understood something most people ignore. Clarity comes from action, not from waiting, not from overthinking, but from doing. The philosopher Seneca warned that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And waiting is often built on imagination. Imagining that something will be too difficult, imagining that you are not ready, imagining that conditions are not right. But once you act, something changes. The resistance weakens, the uncertainty fades, the path becomes clearer, because action creates feedback, real feedback. Not imagined scenarios, not hypothetical outcomes, but real experience. And that experience builds confidence. A strong person does not wait for perfect conditions. They create progress with imperfect action. They understand that starting is more important than planning endlessly, because once you start, you can adjust. You can improve, you can refine, but if you never start, nothing changes. At first, acting without waiting feels uncomfortable, because your mind wants certainty. It wants guarantees. It wants everything to be clear before you begin. But clarity rarely comes before action. It comes through action. Each time you act despite uncertainty, you build courage. You prove to yourself that you can move forward without perfect conditions, and that builds confidence, real confidence, not based on outcomes, but based on your ability to act. A mentally strong person trusts this process. They do not wait for motivation, they do not wait for certainty, they act, and through action they create momentum. Momentum that makes the next step easier, and the next, and the next, until progress becomes natural. Each morning, when you remind yourself to act without waiting, something shifts. You stop delaying, you stop overthinking, you begin to move. And movement creates change, because action is what turns intention into reality. 8. They build discipline daily. There is a reason most people never achieve what they want. It is not because they lack potential. It is not because they lack opportunity. It is because they lack discipline. They rely on motivation. They act when they feel inspired. They stop when they do not. And because motivation is inconsistent, their progress is inconsistent. But the 1% does something different. They build discipline daily, consistently, regardless of how they feel. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to do what must be done, even when it was difficult, even when he did not feel like it, because he understood something powerful. Action should not depend on emotion, it should depend on principle. A strong person does not ask, "Do I feel like doing this?" They ask, "What needs to be done?" and then they do it. This is discipline. Not a single action, but repeated actions, done consistently over time. Each time you act with discipline, you strengthen your mind. You reduce resistance. You build momentum. And over time, that momentum becomes habit, and habits shape your life. At first, discipline feels difficult because it goes against comfort. It requires effort, it requires consistency. But with repetition, something changes. It becomes easier, more natural, more automatic, because now you are not forcing yourself to act. You are simply following your habits. This is where real power lies, in building systems, routines, structures that support your goals. So you do not rely on motivation, you rely on consistency. A mentally strong person understands this. They do not chase intensity, they build stability, because intensity fades, but discipline remains. Each morning when you remind yourself to build discipline, something shifts. You stop relying on how you feel, you start relying on what you do, and that creates consistency. And consistency creates results. Real results. Sustainable results. If this message is helping you build discipline in your life, subscribe to the channel. Because discipline is what separates intention from achievement. 9. They protect their energy. Most people think control is about time, but it is not. It is about energy. Because you can have time and still feel exhausted. You can have hours available and still struggle to focus, because without energy, nothing moves, nothing improves, nothing changes. And yet, most people give their energy away without noticing. They give it to distractions, to unnecessary conversations, to negative thinking, to things that do not move them forward. And by the time they need that energy, it is gone. The Stoics understood something most people overlook. Your inner state determines your external results. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius reminded himself not to be disturbed by things outside his control, not because they did not exist, but because they did not deserve his energy. A strong person becomes selective. They do not react to everything. They do not engage in every argument. They do not give attention to everything that demands it, because they understand that attention is expensive and energy is limited. Each time you react unnecessarily, you lose something: focus, clarity, momentum. And over time, those small losses become significant. A mentally strong person protects their energy. They guard their attention. They choose where their focus goes. Because where attention goes, energy flows, and where energy flows, results follow. This does not mean avoiding responsibility. It means avoiding waste, avoiding unnecessary drains, avoiding things that do not serve your growth. Each morning, when you remind yourself to protect your energy, something shifts. You become more intentional, more focused, more in control, and that control changes how you move through your day, because focus is built by protecting what matters. 10. Control is built daily. There is a belief that control is something you achieve once, something you reach, something you finally have. But that is not how it works. Control is not a destination, it is a practice, something you build daily, through your thoughts, through your actions, through your discipline. The Stoics did not wait to become strong. They trained daily, they reflected daily, they improved daily, because they understood something powerful. What you repeat, you become. If you repeat distraction, you become distracted. If you repeat discipline, you become disciplined. If you repeat awareness, you become aware. This is the process. Simple, but demanding, because it requires consistency. A strong person does not rely on occasional effort. They rely on daily action. They show up every day, not perfectly, but intentionally. They understand that control is built in small moments, in the decisions no one sees, in the actions no one applauds, in the discipline no one recognizes. But those small moments compound. They build habits, they shape identity, they create results, and over time those results become visible, not because of one big change, but because of many small ones. Each morning, when you remind yourself that control is built daily, something shifts. You stop chasing perfection. You focus on consistency. And that consistency creates progress, real progress, sustainable progress. A mentally strong person trusts this process. They commit to it. They live it. Because they know that control is not something you find, it is something you build. Because transformation is built daily. The difference between the 1% and everyone else is not talent. It is not intelligence. It is not luck. It is control. Control over their thoughts, control over their emotions, control over their actions. And that control begins early. Before the world reaches them, they reach themselves. They decide how they will think, how they will act, how they will respond. Most people never take control of this moment. They react, they drift, they follow. But a small percentage does something different. They lead themselves, they guide their mind, they act with intention, and over time that difference compounds. It shapes how they think, how they act, how they live, until one day their life looks completely different, not because they waited for change, but because they created it. Daily, consistently, intentionally. If you made it this far, it means something in you is ready. Ready to take control, ready to improve, ready to become stronger. But what matters now is action. Not tomorrow, not later. Now. Take one idea from this video, apply it in your next morning, because that is where change begins. If this video helped you think differently, if it gave you clarity, if it pushed you to take control, subscribe to the channel, because this is where you build discipline. This is where you build focus. This is where you build a stronger mind. And when you take control of your mind, you take control of your life. Everything you want begins there.